Hi, this is Moms Learning with Moms. I'm Shayla. Today we're going to learn about in vitro with Carla. Go ahead and subscribe to be a team of moms that help each other. We're here to learn from each other, and we face challenges and similar challenges with everything moms and women in general go through. And so this is just a team of people that help each other, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. So Carla's going to start off with her story today. Carla, thanks for doing this for us and being here.
Sure, happy to do so.
Okay. All right, yeah, let's hear your story.
Okay, so I guess I always tell people I struggled with infertility for 20 years because I wasn't married. And that's like a whole different kind of infertility where like you really want to have a family and build your family, but it's just not happening. So I didn't get married till I was 40 and my husband was 45. And so we gave ourselves 6 months to not worry about getting pregnant, but we did want a family and weren't sure exactly what that was going to entail. Again, I was 40, so we kind of assumed that there might be a few issues come along that we might have to get some help. And my husband has some autoimmune issues that he's had an organ transplant, like a lot of medical stuff. So I think in the back of our minds, neither of us really believed that it was going to be easy to build that family that we wanted. And so we gave ourselves 6 months to just be married and not worry about it, which was lovely. And then we started in about January talking to doctors and deciding what we would need. And because, I was healthy, we started doing testing and they seemed to think that I wouldn't have trouble with a pregnancy, but my eggs were old, like 40 years old. So they were starting the numbers for quality of eggs was, declining. And as you get further into your 40s, it just declines more. And there's always the chance of like developmental issues, with having children later on in life. So we kind of thought about that a lot, but we really did want to build a family. So we started doing additional testing. My husband, at one point, we thought maybe we couldn't have any children, that he didn't have the sperm, anyways, all of that kind of stuff. But they decided that they thought that they could make it work. And so for a lot of people, I think, you struggle with infertility for a long time because they kind of start with the easy stuff. Like you're not getting pregnant. Well, let's try some drugs. And then after you do drugs, you do, an IUI. And those are cheaper and easier. And a lot of times people can get pregnant that way. And then you kind of escalate to a full-blown IVF experience. Because of my age, because of his health issues, we kind of didn't mess around with any of that. We just went straight. They kind of just said, if you want this to happen, like we could take a lot of time and try to figure out what the issues are or try to help you other ways, or we can let's just go straight to the hardest and most expensive IVF experience possible. And so that's kind of where we jumped to, which, it's hard because they start telling you how much it's going to cost. And for us, we did 2 rounds, but they were about $25,000 a piece. And you start looking at that and you're like, I can buy several cars.
Wow.
Like, it's just a lot of money. And then they tell you, I think they told us that and to say like the odds of it working is really hard because there's so many different aspects of it. Like, anyway, so they kind of gave us a 60% chance of working kind of number. And you think, you can go to Vegas and you can win with those kinds of odds, but that's after gambling a whole bunch. And so you're kind of just, when you do 1 round of IVF, you're just kind of gambling once and hoping that 60% like works out for you. So that's part of the stress is you just don't know. You want it to work so badly, but it's kind of out of your control. You're kind of putting a lot of faith in your doctors and in the process. And so like just committing to it, my husband, who is amazing, was like, once we spend this money, whether it works or not, we'll never miss the money. Like we're never going to regret trying to make this work. And he reminded me of that several times because again, we did do 2 rounds. So we did our first round.
Now, just to clarify, in vitro is joining a man's sperm and a woman's egg in a laboratory dish.
Yes. So IUI is where they do it. They like squirt sperm into a woman, and then like it's helpful. Like it helps. Like they clean up the sperm, make sure it's healthy and all of those things. And they kind of help the process along that way. So that's cheaper. But with this, so the process as they described it was they would give me a bunch of hormones. I'd try to develop a whole bunch of eggs as much as possible. Then they'd take the eggs, they'd take the sperm, they'd put them together. And we even did a thing called ICSI. Like sometimes, as I understand it, they put the eggs in and then they like drop the sperm in and they kind of do their own things. But like for us, it was this ICSI process where they have the egg, they have one egg, one sperm, and they like put them together, like they like make sure it happens. And so
say that process again. And
ICSI, I think it's ICSI, something like that.
Okay.
I should have looked it up before, so I know.
I have never heard of that word.
It's an acronym of something where it's just like they are put together. So we knew that was the process. And then you have all of these and they like tell you like you'll have all of these embryos. And our thoughts were like, what if we get 12? Like, well, how are we going to feel about not like having 12 children? I'm 40. There's no way I was going to have 12 children, but like you just kind of don't know what you're going to get. So we did the process. So that process is I was on drugs on a lot of hormones for about a month. They, regulate you. They do a lot of appointments. You have a lot of ultrasounds going in, checking your uterus lining, seeing how things are going. And then you start taking these injections. And at one day I remember, and it was kind of a special day because my dosing was weird, but I think I gave myself like 7 injections in one day. And those are just like in your stomach. You just kind of pinch some skin and stick yourself with the needle. And I didn't know how I deal with it, but that actually wasn't too bad. There's a lot of bruising. It looks terrible. I mean, it's not fun, but you do it every day at the same time for a few weeks. And then you go in every 2 or 3 days and they check on how many eggs you're developing. So normally your eggs come down and they go to the lining of your uterus and they start developing. I hope I'm remembering this right based on what the doctors were telling me, but your eggs like mature while you're trying to get pregnant, I guess. Anyways, so your eggs mature, but with the drugs, it sends a whole bunch of eggs where you normally just have like one. A whole bunch come. So they would go in and they'd like count them. And of course it's like an ultrasound. And so just like the baby ultrasound, they're like, oh, there's a head here. There's all this stuff. And they'd be like, here's one and here's one. And I'm like, I just see sand. Like, I don't really know what you're talking about. But and it was hard for me because they're very careful not to give you false hope. They're encouraging, but I would say like, okay, so you saw 12. Is that good? Like, am I doing good? Because there's nothing like in addition that I could do. They give you like a list of herbs and supplements you can take. And I was kind of offended because my list of supplements was one thing and my husband's was another, and his included dark chocolate, but mine fine. So, you're taking supplements, and they did ask me not to exercise. They wanted me to not be jarring myself around very much. They wanted me to keep my heart rate low. And I think a lot of that was just because I was so old. I think people that do this process younger, I don't think it's as much of an issue, but they were pretty careful with me just because, again, they want it to work and they don't want to do anything that might jeopardize that. So do that for a couple of weeks, and then you go in, they knock you out, and they go in and get your mature eggs. And I don't do well when they knock me out. I come to very emotional. I think, Shayla, you've talked about this before, like with like epidurals and stuff like that, like all of that stuff, like I just don't necessarily respond well to those. Right. And so I woke up and just cried for like 12 hours. Oh. And they're like, we got 18 eggs, which they were really positive about that. They're like, lots of eggs. They look good. You did well. We're happy about it. Then they sent me home. And this was the part that if you know anyone going through the process, this is the part that's the hardest, I felt, because you got 18 eggs. And then the next day they call and they say, had 18 eggs, but only 16 were mature and only 12 fertilized. So the numbers, drop. And then you wait a couple days. Yeah, and you're hoping so much, like you need an embryo, and you just spent all this money and you've done all of this and you're high on hormones and you're just kind of a mess. 2 days later, they called again and they said, there's only 6 left. And then you wait and they call 2 days later and there's only 3 left. And you're just seeing them die one at a time.
Wow.
You've gone through all again, like I was a mess. And I wish the second time we did it, I made them call my husband so that my husband could tell me what the results were, because they would call me at work and it was really hard to, like, I'd be watching for the call. So I'd be kind of a mess that way. And then they'd tell me how many were left. So we ended up with 2 at that point, and then they send them off for DNA testing to see if they are chromosomally if they were viable embryos. So we sent that off, and then you wait another week. It's like it's all these waiting, just not knowing what's going on and crossing your fingers and praying and just hoping that things work out. And only 1 came back viable. And they had like rating on them. It was a girl, and we were trying not to find out, but I went to the doctor and I was like being nosy on had all my papers out. I was like, what are you looking at? And I was alone. My husband was home. It was just my appointment that day. And I saw that it was a girl. And I was like, oh, I didn't want to find out what it was. So I went home and I was like, I found out what it is. Do you want to know? And he's like, not right now. I'm too tired. And so we got some eclairs and filled them with pink filling and gave it to him that night. So like our gender reveal with the 2 of us. Before it was even more 1,000 cells. So like it was just this little embryo. And so we had 1, and we knew that if we transferred and I got pregnant and waited, by the time we could do the whole process again, I'd be like 43. And that's just even more time. So we prayed about it and thought a lot, and we really wanted more than 1 child. So we decided to spend all of the money again and try again. So we did the whole process again.
Was that right after then? Could you do that right after?
Did it right after. They just put the embryo in the freezer, and we just said, store it for us. Let's see what we get the next time. The next time they added an injection. It was a human growth hormone that they added the next time. And that's, each time you do it, they can take the information that they got, but like, again, each time it's like so expensive that, anyways, so they added an injection for me, did the whole thing again, went through the whole process again. They called that time, they got like 21 eggs. So we were feeling really good about it. And they dropped off. That was the one time that we named one of them, because they were like, you got 6, and then there's the 7th that's like not doing well, but it's almost okay. And so we named him Wilbur, my little runt. He did not make it. But trying to have humor about it and anyways, we had 6 at the end of that one, and then we sent them to testing and got back 2. So was it 2? Yeah. We got back 2. So at that point we had 3 in the freezer, felt pretty good about that. And then we went, so then you get to go on more hormones, and then they do the transfer, which is they thaw the embryo and then they go in, and you can be awake for that. It was kind of cool. You can kind of see, you can't see the embryo because it's tiny, but it's like a little syringe that they have basically, but you can see a bubble in front of and a bubble behind the embryo. So when they push it out, like in the ultrasound, you can kind of see the 2 bubbles. And so we could see like it going in, and they're like, lay here for a few minutes, let that settle. And then they want you to be really careful for another few days. And then you start injections for the first trimester of your pregnancy. Those injections are in your butt. And if you've ever tried to give yourself a shot in your butt, it's not easy. So those are a little bit more annoying. And my whole backside, because you go from one side to the other trying to avoid the bruised spots. And so it's just kind of this whole different, I've been very healthy, which is great. So I've never really had health interventions like that. My husband he's given himself injections tons of times, but it was a very new experience for me, and I hated it. I didn't really like it, but I got pregnant.
How long did you have to do the injections?
First trimester.
The whole first trimester.
So if I remember correctly, it was a long time. And it's just, I believe that was estrogen. They're just estrogen in oil kind of So there's that. They were really careful with me during my whole pregnancy. I couldn't get my heart rate over. And that was really hard for me because I'm an exerciser. That's how I stabilize my emotions. And to not be able to do that. And I gained more weight than I had wanted to because I couldn't really exercise. Again, because I was a high risk pregnancy. I was 21 or 41. I was 41, not 21. And but I had a fairly good pregnancy. We had a little girl and she's adorable. But then right after, as soon as I think she was 6 months when we started going back, because at 9 months I could try again. And we really wanted these other two. We wanted 2 more kids. We had these 2 more eggs. And so we just wanted to do it so I could be as young as possible to make all of that work. We had a little boy and a little girl, and neither of them worked. So they did the transfer, and I would assume, I've never had like a miscarriage, but I'd assume it's a lot. It just felt a lot like that. The first one really never took. They keep checking to see, you have to wait a certain amount, and then they'll do pregnancy tests and have you come in and look at them. First one didn't take at all, which was very disappointing. The second one, it was a blighted ovum. So my body started creating the embryo sac, but the embryo itself never grew. So it was like an empty sac. So they went in and it looked like I was pregnant. My body was producing all the hormones. It said it was working. But then I started bleeding one day and they went back in and said, there's nothing in there. I didn't have to do a DNC. Everything, it was fairly early on. Everything went fairly smoothly as far as that goes. But it was, we knew that was our last chance. And my husband's from a family of 10 kids. I'm from a family of 6. The thoughts of raising an only child I just had never really thought about it. And it wasn't the family we had envisioned. And so that was hard. I mean, we all have hard things we go through, but it was kind of a period of me,
this is grieving and mourning that.
I feel sad because you have this beautiful baby, and I have so many friends that did IVF and didn't get anything and did like 3 and 4 rounds before getting anything. And we really were lucky. Like it went relatively smoothly. It's again, very emotional and very hard. And you just feel like you're throwing money out your window, hoping that something happens. But we were lucky to get her, but you also need to allow yourself that time to mourn something that you thought you'd have, something that you really wanted. And fortunately, I guess, right after that, my husband's health took a steep decline, and he was really struggling for a little bit. And I did the math again. I was like, oh, if the pregnancy had worked, like you going through this would be right at the end of a pregnancy that would have, like, I don't know how we would have dealt with that. So it's kind of hard to say thanks, I guess, but if you're going to fix one of these things, could you just fix his health and give me the baby? And, that would have been an option too, but no. And it's been good. She's 3 years old now, and we feel extremely lucky to have gotten her. She's adorable. So we just always tell people that you get what you pay for, because she was very expensive.
She really is adorable. So, and I know she's worth every penny of it. But
and he was right. Joe was right. Like we've never, even the fact that the second round didn't work necessarily. I don't think either of us have ever regretted spending that extra, again, like $25,000 to try to feel like we had, given it every shot, given the opportunities for the blessings to come, and done what we could. And it didn't work out like we had hoped, but it's also been great. I mean, sometimes she's like a lot of work, and I think, how does anyone deal with more than one? It's hard.
So do you have advice for people who, like, other advice for people who are thinking about this process?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's different. Everybody's experience is different. Because I was older when I got married, I have a lot of friends who have been older when they've gotten married too, and they've, done IUIs, and I have 2 friends who went through multiple rounds of IVF and then got pregnant without, just said, well, never mind, this isn't going to work. And then they just get pregnant. So there's so many different people with different stories. I feel like in the beginning, my husband's a much more private person than I am. I will tell anybody anything. And I feel very comfortable probably sharing more than should all the time. But I saw people go through this barely telling their family and like keeping it very much to themselves. And I couldn't have done that. And I watched them and I feel like I wish they had more of that support system, like people like mourning these things with you when they don't work out, or cheering you on, or, and it's hard because like when you're going through that period when they're calling and your chances are like dying every day basically, it's really hard to talk about. And I'm not sure that I really wanted to talk about it all the time, but I knew that my people were there when I needed them. And I think that support system, the fertility center that we went to actually had a support group that you could go to and have like a group of people that you talk to as you were going through this process. And my process, I mean, it felt like it took forever, but it was really, I mean, we started in January and we were pregnant by the following January. It was like a year. And I know people that spend so many years and we were lucky too, because we took out a small loan for part of it, but we had it all paid for within a year. And, you know, other people live with infertility debt because they have to do it when they're so much younger and aren't established in their careers with savings and all those kinds of things. And I just can't imagine doing it by myself. I had sisters, I had parents, I had friends, and I felt very, very supported. Like I could talk to people. And when I ran into someone right before we started the whole process, and they had done IVF. And that was the one thing they said, like, if you need anyone to talk to, we're here. And we weren't really close friends or anything. It was kind of just an acquaintance, but they had kind of said the same thing. You need a support group to go through it. And they might not understand exactly what you're going through. But just having that listening ear. And my husband was great, because on those days that I would just cry and cry and cry, he would just let me cry and cry and cry for whatever reason, whether it was because things were going well or things were not going well, or like all of these things. Like I had a lot of emotions and I needed to share them. I think if I kept them bottled up inside, I would have exploded. So,
so the whole year to 2 years is pretty emotional roller coaster.
I mean, you think like how you feel when you're pregnant, and there's just a lot of stuff going on, and it's all going on within you. So it's kind of like it's like this solitary thing. Even your husband's not really going through it with you. I mean, they are, but I was a little bit of a mess. I cried a lot. And I felt, I don't know, you know, when you're crying and you're not sure exactly why. So you feel like I'm not choosing to be happy right now. I need to choose that this isn't stressing me out. It's going to be fine. And I also got to points where I just had to kind of learn to be like, just need to let myself feel this. This is my journey. This is my experience. And these are my emotions. And I get to cry if I want to cry.
You too. That's really good.
Yeah. It's again, I've never really dealt with health issues like that, or having to go to doctors, or having to deal with all those kinds of things. So it was a real eye-opening experience for me. The doctors don't know anything. They try, and they can do amazing things, but I mean, this might help. We'll try this. We don't know why it does that. We don't know why this.
So there's a lot that's unknown about it still. It's still so.
I mean, I think medicine in general, again, my husband has a lot of health problems, and it's just like a lot of shots in the dark.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. A lot. I just feel like doctors are trying this and trying that, and they're so helpful and all of that. Doctors are helpful. Insurance companies, not as much so. And ours, in fact, the year after I did in vitro, our insurance started covering some infertility, which was totally not useful for us. So if you have insurance that helps, that would be great. But it's crazy.
So with them gathering all those eggs at the same time, Carla, does menopause come earlier? Like, is there research, like, for any sort of?
I think so. And it was kind of interesting throughout my pregnancy, they would ask me, and even afterwards, when I had my little girl's named Lily, when I had Lily, wasn't able to breastfeed. Like it just, my milk never really came in. But every time I would go to talk to like the nurses or whatever, the nurses that would help you with nursing, they would always ask me if I had done infertility. And I said, yeah, it's IVF. I'm like, does that make a difference? No. I'm like, then why do you always ask? Like, so I don't know if they don't know if it makes a difference, how that all happens. I mean, technically your body's doing the same thing. I don't know, say we had like 10 viable embryos, but I definitely can't have 10 children at the age of 40. You can actually, people can adopt your embryos and you can give them to someone else, which feels weird. We didn't know how we felt about that. Or you can have a sperm donation, depending on what your problems are, all of these other issues come in. And we actually had to sign paperwork, like if you don't use your embryos, how do you want them disposed? Like you can take them home and you can bury them, or like you can treat them however you want. And a lot of people have different feelings about that. So the whole IVF process also has all of these kind of moral issues that you don't really think about until you get there. And like, what if one of mine had come back and I would know that it was Down syndrome? Like, how would I choose? What do you choose when you actually have this choice? And the other thing is that you do know the gender. So for a while we were thinking we were going to have to choose. We ended up just choosing the embryo that had the best grade, like it was graded the best. But if you got a girl and a boy, like, how do you choose? It feels weird to be able to choose. I was like, that's somebody else's job. They're just supposed to send me because then if it's a bad choice and your older son is always picking on your little girl and you're like, way around, it would have been better. You would blame yourself. So there's a lot of moral issues that come in that I wasn't really prepared for. And I didn't have to deal with a lot of those, but it can get really complicated.
Do you know what age is there an age that they stop you from even considering IVF?
No, it's interesting. One of my friends that was doing it, her doctor, they kind of sent them out, said she needed to have a bunch of procedures that another gynecologist said she didn't need. And they were basically trying to discourage her from doing IVF with them because it would they didn't think she would be able to become pregnant, and it would lower their rate of success. And so they were kind of like, isn't that horrible?
That is horrible.
Horrible, but they want a high success rate so that they can point to that when someone's they can point to it when someone's like coming in, they're like, oh yeah, we have like an 80% success rate. But if you're not keeping everyone, if you're sending people away, if they're too old or you don't think it's going to work, then it's kind of skewed. And like, if you're young enough, they actually will give money back guarantees if they feel like there's a really good chance that they can make it work. For anyone over, I think it's like 35, they won't do anything like that because the quality of eggs that you're using is so much lower usually. Wow. Isn't that weird? Everything. I mean, just that everybody's journey is so different. And I think that's like, I would never want to presume, well, I've been through this, so I can like tell you all the things to expect. I think I can tell, people like this, like how emotional you get and how just to allow yourself to know that this is going to be like a hard process. But other than that, yeah, everybody's journey is different. And because all of the different infertility issues can be so different, whether it's, the woman or the man or somehow together or age or just, all of the things that can happen. I feel that way even I would feel like going into labor like multiple times, like it's just different every time. And everybody seems to have
right
their birth story that's like just a little bit different. And IVF's just a lot of the same.
That is so great. Carla, that's perfect. Thank you. I think that was a lot of great information to share. And that was really helpful for at least even me understanding what the process is and how to go through that. All right. Well, we're going to close and thank you, Carla, for joining us, and just keep learning.